Hey there, Chad here with another episode of Kerbal Space Program in 2021. In this episode, I am going to try to do a manned mission to Minmus. Now, the ultimate goal is to land on the moon, but Minmus is a little easier to get to. Even though it's further away, it is much smaller, so its gravitational factors are much easier to deal with on an early flight. So we are going to go to Minmus. We're going to collect a ton of science, probably enough to propel me through several more stages of development of different systems. But to do that, one thing I do need is the ability to land. And most specifically, I want the good landing struts. That's what I'm really looking for. I've already got a couple, but these are the kind of the heavy duty ones. They work real well, and I like that. I have enough science to go ahead and grab that. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, in the interest of saving a little time, I've already built a rocket. I saved it, and we're going to take a look at it so you can build one like it if you'd like. But I do want to make it clear that this isn't one that is included, that this is one that I built. I got this idea of the three-pronged approach here from another YouTuber that does Kerbal videos, and it works really well. It's very stable when the landing gear is extended. Gives you a very wide landing profile. The balance is very nice on it because of that. But let's go over some of the other stuff that's on here. We have two Thumper solid fuel boosters. Have a couple of main fuel tanks, the 200-32s. Have the Skipper liquid fuel engine. So this is the larger series of rockets. Of course, I have my control planes there. I added the launch stability enhancers because I was having some trouble with the rocket was falling apart on the pad. And it turned out what happened is at some point while I was working on it, one of these struts, I failed to put on the symmetry down here so that you can do these in up to 8 different rotations. It was on 1 instead of 2, and when I attached it, it only attached the struts on this side instead of on both, and it made a huge difference. So that's something to pay attention to if you're ever seeing things kind of look wonky. It literally, this solid rocket booster sitting on the pad was almost inside the main fuel. There clearly was a problem, and I didn't see it right away. It took a while to do that. Something else I've done here that's a little weird is this is the solid rocket fuel. Then here's some liquid fuel. I put a little extra liquid fuel on top of these, and I set it up so that these will run out of fuel roughly the same time that the solid rocket fuel runs out. It is not exact, but it's intended to be fairly close. So I can maximize the amount of fuel, keep this tank full as long as possible, and then jettison the entire shebang when it is time. Okay, up here we have the Terrier engine. There is just a single fuel tank here. Then there's a fuel tank on each of these 3 nodes, and you'll notice it's feeding into the middle there. The idea is this entire thing lands on Minmus, and then when it's time to lift off, this will start to lift off, and then it'll drop these pieces off. Okay, then we have some solar panels to make sure we have enough energy. Shouldn't really be a factor here, but I like to be safe. Running out of power is the worst thing that can happen in a mission. It's the one that'll happen the most because you're not thinking about it. So I almost always include some sort of solar panel. The other thing that really is horrible is when you run out of power and none of your solar panels are pointing towards the sun. Maybe that's the worst. Okay, we have the fuel tank. I have an inline stabilizer to help with maneuverability because I do not yet have the thrusters. I don't think I have the thrusters yet. I do have the thrusters, but I didn't want to use the big, that's right, I didn't want to use the round monopropellant tank. I don't have an inline tank yet for monopropellant, so I didn't want to include these in this particular mission, so I'm not using them. I'm strictly going with the inline stabilizer that uses gyros. Then I also have 3 Science Juniors on here. That's to run science. Inside the service bay, there's some goo, and there's thermometers and pressure meters, as you might expect. Let's close that. I've got the capsule, a couple of antennae in case I need it to send anything, although I don't really think I do. Big battery, and the experiment storage unit. Now, I covered this in another episode, but what this will allow me to do is take all the science that gets collected in these pieces and only return this part to the planet, but all the experiments get stored here, so I don't have to physically return these, and that'll allow it to go ahead and transfer. Now, this is going to be a somewhat long video. I probably will cut it into two. Haven't really planned out where exactly that's going to happen yet, but I'm going to go ahead and run through the mission here and see what we get. I do want to check my staging real quick. Always a good thing to do before you launch. The good news is you do have that revert, the do-over button, right? But we have the main engine, the two sides. This is just connected with the launch sequence. We drop the sides. We cut the main. So this engine, I hold on to it a really long time, actually. This is going to actually start the transmooner. No, it's not the moon, though. Trans-Minmus burn, I guess, might be what we would call it. There won't be a whole lot of power in it when I do that. Probably just a couple of 100 meters per second of delta V, but it'll be enough to get us started, and then this guy will kick in and finish the mission. What is really amazing is how little power is required, little delta V is required to return back to the planet. From Minmus, you can get by with under, I think it's under 200 meters per second. Probably a little more than that, come to think of it. Nonetheless, it's a very small number, and depending on how much heat your capsule can take on re-entry, how steep you're going to come in from that far out, you can get by with using very little fuel. We'll take a look at that when we get there. Okay, onto the launch pad. Now, with the rocket having, the three pieces at the top, it is a little funky to drive, to get it up there. That's the only real difficulty with this arrangement, and it's particularly difficult initially. Symmetrically, it's all balanced. It doesn't have a problem, but I think the aero working on it, there's probably more drag on one side than the other because of that, and so it makes it a little difficult to really get up to altitude, but it's not impossible. And I've had really good luck with these styles of rockets. I've also done one with 4 nodes down here. The 4th node was, well, from a symmetrical standpoint, much easier to deal with. It didn't really make it any easier to get there, though, outside of that part. It didn't, the extra fuel you bring along in that wasn't worth the difference. So here we go. Once again, let's see, I don't need heat right now. Vessel, the rest of that's probably pretty good. I want to keep my thrust to weight ratio at about 1.5 as I'm going up. And of course, as the atmosphere gets thinner, that number changes. Also, I do have the science here and now turned on, so that I can grab those when we get to Minmus. There will be, we're talking probably 700 points of science. One last thing, I want to clear out these messages before we go. They no longer really apply to our current situation. These were from the last mission, and I always forget to clean those up. Okay, so we're at full thrust. We have SAS on. I have lights on in the capsule. Here we go. And I'm going to throttle down just a little, save a little fuel in the thicker part of the atmosphere, and start to nose over. Now, Minmus is not in the typical plane that the moon and all the other planets are in. I believe drifting a little south of the fly line here is probably going to be okay. It might help with the situation with getting into the appropriate plane to get to Minmus. Okay, so thrust to weight is, just dialed it back to 150. And again, I've mentioned this before, but I usually wait till, whoa, there's the end of that stage already. Oh, I didn't want that to happen. So we'll go ahead and thrust up. It's a little earlier than I expected. at sea level, there was about 4,600 delta V in this rocket, but in the out of the atmosphere, it was closer to 8,000. So there should be a ton of fuel and energy in this rocket as we get going. It does feel like it takes forever to get there with the larger ones, it seems. I don't know why. That just looks really cool. We're going to start to generate some heat here soon. At least I think we're gathered. We're starting to see some glow. And I might have to, I'm going to go ahead and dial back just a hair for that. Our APO still is only at 32,000. We're 10 kilometers under that right now. It's starting to kind of rocket up there a little bit. Throttle back up. We're not seeing any warnings on heat, so that's good. Right now I'm keeping a close eye up here. As soon as that crosses the 70, I want to be very careful with how much above that I go. I'm probably going to aim for about 80. So that's 80K or 80,000 meters. Okay, we're getting there. And I'm going to go ahead and kill the engine. We're starting to generate some heat there. There's our heat warnings, but they'll start to back off. Okay. So this is Hotel, which is at about 100 kilometers. Let's go ahead and circularize an orbit. Boom, there it is. It's at 126. This will be closer to 70. I like my orbits to be round for the most part. It's not entirely necessary, but I feel like the closer you get, it just gives you some different options. You're not having to deal with wasting of energy on one side or the other. Okay, so our burn is going to be 29 seconds. We'll call that, we'll burn it at 15 seconds here, and we need to get on the mark. And this is where the stabilizer comes into play. The idea behind that is gyroscopes, very large gyroscopes that can affect the direction that the ship moves by spinning and rotating those gyroscopes. If you're not familiar with that, if you ever have a gyroscope and you kind of can hold it between your fingers and you turn it from like a vertical to horizontal, it's a very peculiar feeling. You can kind of feel it trying to torque your hand. And that's really the science behind what is getting done here with those gyroscopes inside that stabilizer. Our burn time reduced to 26 seconds, which will be 13 seconds on each side. So we will wait for T minus 13 to execute this burn. Notice we still have 1,200 meters per second. We're going to be using 800 of it though, 850. Could have had Jeb do an EVA, but right now it's just we're getting the job done that we're here for. Here we go. Looks pretty good on the fly line here for where the maneuver wants us to be. Maybe drifting a little bit, so I'm just going to dial that over just a touch. And really, you know, a lot of this comes down to the maneuver is the ideal. If you're close to it, you're going to be in good shape. You're going to be in the ballpark of what you're trying to get done. 2, 1, 0. Okay. And we'll give it just a little extra. There we go. Let's see how we did. Well, I guess I can look up here at the numbers. That is pretty darn good. That's within a kilometer. I'll take that. I'll take that any day. Okay. And there we are. There's the ship. We still have 340 meters per second of energy in it. We're going to hang on to that. We won't really need that, I don't think, but there's nothing wrong with keeping it. Generally, particularly when you go to other worlds in Kerbal, if you can bring extra energy with you, you ought to keep it as long as you can. So let's take a look at the bigger picture. So we're wanting to go to Minmus. That's the moon. and that is Minmus. So I'm going to double click Minmus, set as target, and what you'll notice is this is generally the planetary plane. The moon is basically on that, and you can see how much off Minmus is from that. If you kind of rotate it around a little bit, of course we're focused on Minmus, so that makes it hard, but you can see there's a very good angle there that we're off. And currently what we are off is 3.5 degrees. That's actually not all that bad. So let's see. With Minmus being the target, I'm focused on the ship again though. What I want to do, and we've done this before, but always good to see it in case you missed it in a previous episode. What I will do is lock that so I know what the difference is. And oh, I went the right way for the first time in a very long time. I picked the right direction. I always get confused on those. But basically I want this to go to 0. And not only do I want it to go to 0, but if I do it at 90 degrees from this line, so if it would be basically perfectly parallel to the tangent of where this is, that would be effectively perfect. That's the goal of that would be where these are equal. There's an equilibrium at that point. That means we are right on it at that point. So to do this maneuver, a little more energy than I thought, 138 meters per second. A lot of times these planar adjustments don't take a whole lot at all. Not quite sure why this one's a little more than that. I really was expecting it to be probably about 80 or less, but that's okay. I might be misremembering also. I haven't flown out to Minmus in a while. Okay, so what I want to do is get on the mark. And this is taking a little, this is moving slowly because I don't have the maneuver thrusters on here. It's strictly using the inertia of those gyroscopes to rotate the ship. And this is a whole lot of momentum here, or inertia, to overcome with these little bitty gyroscopes down here. Once we drop the big can here, the ship will be much more maneuverable for obvious reasons. Looks like I took the long way to get there, doesn't it? That's okay. What else were we doing? And the one thing I kind of wish is that those, well, again, this is a video game. We don't have to be exactly precise. I kind of wish that the maneuver node was overlaid on top of everything so you could see when it's centered on the little dot there. Nonetheless, that's okay. This should be really close to where we want to be. And you'll notice the burn time is going to be 3 seconds. That is next to nothing, right? So we will, in fact, I'll probably do it at, probably start the burn at 5 seconds and not do a full burn. So first thing I'm going to do is warp to the next maneuver. That'll put me within a minute. Not saving a ton of time there, but a little bit. And then we will accelerate time down to about 20 seconds. There we go. Maybe just a little further. When I get to 5, I'm basically going to do a slow throttle up. I'm not going to do a full burn. And we'll just kind of hold it steady at a low value here. That'll work. I think that's going to do it. And kill it. Let's see how close we came. Whoops. I meant to do this. Not perfect, but close. I could probably, yeah, just a quick tap on the fuel, move that around like that. And that's probably about where I want it to be. Okay. Part 1 done. We are in the proper plane. So you'll notice if we come in here, this line here is now our orbit, and it is effectively lined up with that one, the Minmus line. So, okay, we're in the right plane at this point. Next, top-down view. When you're going to the moon, or Minmus anyway, the best way to visualize it is to put it at 3 o'clock. Put your maneuver node at 6 o'clock. and try to intercept around noon. Or midnight, I suppose, depending on how you want to look at it. Now this is just to get started. There will be a lot of adjustment happening. Also, I don't know if you noticed that, there was a little blip right about here. Okay, I guess it didn't happen that. There it is. That is where we're going to be really close to the moon. If we kept that orbit, it would be really close to the moon, and it would affect how this all plays out. So what this would do, this would put us past Minmus, and then we would catch it kind of on the backswing. I want to see if I can get a little closer if I put it right on there. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. And sometimes it's really hard to get in there and grab these things independently because everything starts to light up. There we go. So there, if I pull it a little bit that way, that's darn close. What do we have for Perry? I know I'm seeing it there, I'm just not holding it. There it is, 768. Okay, so I'm effectively accelerating to bring that down. Here we go. We want to get to, that's a little too close, right there, 14,000. That would be absolutely perfect. Now, the other thing we can do, double click on Minmus, and I can see what that actually looks like here. That's pretty good. That's our projected trajectory. Technically, I could go ahead and set up another maneuver node right now, and I would have two of them. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Do I want to do that? Let's just look at what it does. So what we would do is we'd want to create an orbit here. Okay, so that would be roughly 14,000. Yeah, that's a pretty good orbit there. So I have two maneuver nodes now that are currently set up, and I'm trying to remember, there should be somewhere where I can kind of toggle between them and it'll tell me, yeah, it's this guy right here. No, that's the warp 2. I don't want to click that. This mission runs a little long. It comes in at over an hour to complete. So I'm going to cut the video here, and I will pick up in the next one at this spot. Until then, thanks for watching and fair travels.